Thank you for being here today, and welcome to all. I want to, before we begin with our usual introduction, I really want to stop for a moment and have a moment of silence in honor of the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice of the United States Supreme Court. She she wrote and she authored the most powerful decision for people with disabilities in the last 25 years, the Olmsted decision, which allows people with disabilities to stay out of institutions and to leave institutions. I want to pause for just about 10 seconds and have a moment of silence in honor of her life and her work in showing us all that we can make a difference. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone on this Monday. My name is Mike Bullis. I'm executive director of the Image Center of Maryland, the Center for Independent Living that serves Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Harford County. I have other colleagues here from Centers for Independent Living throughout the state. There is a SIL in your area. If you don't know what it is, please ask so that we can direct you to the organization that is operating as a hub to bring you the information and services that you need as a person with a disability. We are pleased to bring you this program of importance to people with disabilities and services providers throughout the state. This program is being recorded, so anything you say can and will be used against you. And will be up live, not live, excuse me, it will be up on YouTube. Usually it's up by Wednesday or so after we get a little editing done. You will be muted now, and we will unmute you as you find need to talk. If you like to chat, or if you want to have a question, you might throw the information into the chat box, and either Michael Dalto will catch it or Lori Magruder will catch it. Use the chat box for questions or to raise your hand. There will be, at the end of this program, community announcements, and but let me, for the moment, just mention next week's I Am program. Next week, we will be talking about elections in Maryland, how to vote, where to vote, what to do when you vote, what are some of the accessibility issues you need to be concerned about. Ben Jackson with Disability Rights Maryland will be with us for an hour next week to talk about voting and the importance of voting here in Maryland. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Lori Magruder. Lori is executive director of the Center for Independent Living that serves Western Maryland, whose name has suddenly and totally escaped my mind, and I didn't write it down, and I'm embarrassed, Lori. So I will turn this program over to Lori Magruder, who will introduce today's speaker and will moderate for us today.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. It's Resources for Independence.
I knew that.
You did that. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. I hope everyone is enjoying some of this beautiful sunshine on a Monday, and we're very excited about our guest today. So I'm going to just do a couple little tidbits about Michael Dalto, and then I'm going to just roll it over to him to get started. So Michael has delivered training and technical assistance on disability benefits and work-related incentives 30 years. I think of that 30 years, I've known you 22 years. I did the math, so that's great. He created a state benefits planning certification in Maryland, and there he trained, certified, and technically assisted over 50 benefits planners. He oversaw benefits counseling and financial education for the Maryland Promise Project, a research grant that serves youths who receive SSI and their families. He consulted with the Institute for Community Inclusion of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, on the SGA project, and that is a research effort that tested interventions to support vocational rehabilitation consumers in Kentucky and Minnesota to work their way off of Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, as we all know it. He has written training materials about benefits, including part of the CWIC training manual, and provided technical assistance to Virginia Commonwealth University. He has helped create tiered benefits planning models in Michigan and Missouri. He currently consults with Griffin Hammis Associates and with the National Association of Blind Merchants. I just want to say on a personal note that Michael has impacted our agency, our Center for Independent Living in Western Maryland, and numerous folks in Western Maryland and all over the state. And I could even expand that to nationally. He's just a wealth of information. So take it over, Michael.
Thank you very much, Lori. It's very kind of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And got a PowerPoint. At least one person has requested this in an accessible format, so I'll be describing any graphics and letting you know when I'm switching slides. But first, I have a son who's now 30 years old, and when he was about 5 or 6, I remember he was playing in the living room with a friend of his while I was in the kitchen making dinner, and I could hear the play was getting louder and more boisterous, and finally I heard something come crashing down and glass break, and then there was silence for a few moments, and then his friend, who was obviously trying to deflect attention from her own responsibility for the accident, said to my son, "Oh, Isaac, you're in big trouble now." And my son replied, "Trouble? Me? But I'm having so much fun." And to this day, I think that's still his philosophy of life. But the work incentives you'll be learning just a tad about today are one way that you can have a lot of fun helping people get out of trouble. People who otherwise decline to work or to increase their earnings for fear of losing benefits. So this presentation is called Work Without Fear, Using Work Incentives to Protect Benefits When You Work. So to start with, why are people so afraid of working? Well, because people have typically grown pretty attached to the benefits they get from Social Security. For one thing, it often takes a long time. People have to fight long and hard to get the benefits in the first place. It's quite common for it to take upwards of 6 months to a year to get an initial decision. If you're denied benefits when you first apply and have to go through appeals, it can frequently take over 2 years to get benefits. While you're waiting to get benefits, many people have little or no money to live on. And even if people aren't very concerned about the benefits they get, somebody else in their life probably is. A family member, an advocate, a residential program. Now, another issue that discourages people from work is that everybody's heard at least one horror story about people being ineligible for benefits if they're capable of working, let alone if they're already working. And these rumors are absolutely false. A person can be capable of working. They can even be working at the time they apply for benefits from Social Security and still be eligible. They do have to have a disability that limits their ability to work, but doesn't necessarily prevent them from working. So people begin to get the cash benefits that they might have had to fight long and hard to get in the first place. And they begin to think of those benefits as their livelihood. This is my security. And the medical benefits that come along with the cash benefits become people's lifelines. This is what meets their essential medical needs and often pays for services people need in the community. So people are reluctant to do anything that would jeopardize those benefits. So we're up to slide 4 now, and this shows one of the world's most famous paintings. It's called The Scream. And slide 5 shows one of the most famous examples of plagiarism in the world. It's the Home Alone Macaulay Culkin trailer. It's kind of uncanny, isn't it? But there are good reasons that people are so terrified of going to work because everybody's heard at least one horror story that goes something like this. My neighbor's sister-in-law was getting Social Security disability benefits, and she went to work and she lost all of her benefits. And then a few weeks later, she lost her job, and she tried for years to get her benefits back, and she never succeeded. And now she's buried in the backyard or something like that. And all it takes is one good horror story like that to scare people off. Luckily, the work incentives, these safety nets that we'll be talking about today, provide layers of protection for people to make sure that they're better off working and that they've got certain protections for benefits that they rely on when they go to work. So what are these magical work incentives of which I speak? And slide 7 has a photo of Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings. Well, they're safety nets, and the work incentives, to kind of give you a broad outline, enable people to keep the cash benefits they get from Social Security longer, sometimes permanently, or at higher levels while they're working. So there's some protection for the cash benefits. Very importantly, the work incentives protect people's medical benefits, even if they work their way off their cash benefits. So they're not going to lose their medical coverage. If a person has worked their way off cash benefits, and then later they stop working or their earnings drop low enough, they can get the cash benefits back without having to reapply, which is a great safety net. And there are a couple of work incentives that even let people get extra benefits if they go to work. There's one that enables people to qualify for Medicaid, which is also known as medical assistance in the state of Maryland. And there's something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, which gives people bigger tax refunds if they go to work and they qualify. So I love those two work incentives because they turn people's fears on their heads. People are terrified that they're going to lose benefits when they go to work. Here are a couple of work incentives that let people get additional benefits, but only if they go to work. So there are two primary types of benefits that people get from Social Security based on disability. And just to very briefly summarize them, there's SSI, which stands for Supplemental Security Income. And I apologize, I've been falling down on the job here. This is slide 10. SSI is a need-based benefit. It's based on financial need. It's for people with very low income and assets who have significant disabilities or who are at least 65 years old. And it's designed to make sure people have at least a basic minimum level of income to pay for food and shelter. And the maximum benefit that a person, an unmarried individual, can get in Maryland this year from SSI is $783 a month. If a person gets SSI in Maryland and in most other states, they're automatically and immediately eligible for Medicaid, also known as medical assistance. So what are the SSI work incentives? Well, first off, if a person gets SSI and they go to work, they're always going to have more money. They're always going to be better off, even if they don't use any special work incentives that you usually have to request. And the reason for that is when you go to work and you get SSI, your SSI gets reduced, but not dollar for dollar by your earnings. It's only reduced by less than half of earnings. So your SSI goes down, but your income from wages goes up a lot more and you come out ahead. Now, there are some special rules that can let you get even more SSI than you ordinarily would if you're working. There's one that's just for students under age 22. It's called the Student Earned Income Exclusion. That one lets an eligible student on SSI earn up to $7,670 a year in gross wages and still keep their full SSI, not have it reduced at all. There's another one that helps people pay for certain work-related expenses that are either based on a disability or a medical condition they have, or could be any work-related expense if the person is blind. And those expenses are subtracted from the income that would otherwise be counted against the person's SSI and lets them get more SSI that helps offset those out-of-pocket expenses. If a person is working and they have a career goal, maybe full-time employment or self-employment, there's a work incentive called PASS, Plan to Achieve Self-Support, that helps people reach a career goal by helping them pay for expenses to reach that goal, by enabling them to get or keep more SSI to help offset those expenses. So these work incentives let people get more SSI while they're working. My favorite SSI work incentive is one that makes sure that if you get SSI and you go to work full time, you've got nothing to lose. This one says, if you earn enough from work to reduce your SSI payments to 0, you still remain eligible for SSI. And that does two things. It lets you keep your Medicaid or medical assistance. And if anything happens to your job later, it lets you go right back on SSI without having to reapply.
That's good.
So you're really protected. Work your way off SSI, no problem. Keep your Medicaid, be able to go right back on SSI if anything happens to your job later. And there's no time limit for that. You usually have to keep earnings below a certain amount, which is a little over $41,000 a year in earnings this year in Maryland. But in many cases, it can be even higher, particularly if a person has expensive services covered by Medicaid. Other kind of cash benefit that people get based on disability from Social Security is called Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI. And see, this is rule number 1 for bureaucrats who are trying to confuse the public. You get very different benefits, very similar names. SSI and SSDI are only one letter different, but they're very different benefits. Remember, SSI is a cash benefit based on financial need. You get it because you have low income and assets. SSDI is an insurance benefit, and this is slide 13, excuse me. It's an insurance benefit. You get it because you, or in some cases, a particular family member, have worked and paid into the system. You pay into the system by paying Social Security taxes on your earnings. It's usually called FICA. You can find it on your pay stubs. That's how you pay into the system. And if you've paid into the system long enough, then you'll have what they call insured status. And if you have an eligible disability, you can then qualify for SSDI. So some people get SSDI, most people do, because they have worked in the past and paid Social Security taxes on their earnings. But other people get it on the work record of a parent who's retired, disabled, or deceased. So if the parent worked and paid Social Security taxes on their earnings long enough, and now they're retired, disabled, or deceased, then the son or daughter, adult son or daughter with a disability, can get a Social Security disability benefit on the parent's record. And then finally, there's a benefit for disabled widows or widowers who can get Social Security disability on the earnings record of their deceased spouse. Now, we said SSI comes along with a medical benefit called Medicaid. SSDI also comes along with a medical benefit, and that's Medicare. But there's a downside. If you get Medicare by qualifying for SSDI, there's a 2-year waiting period. You have to wait 2 years to be entitled to SSDI for 2 years before your Medicare will start. With SSI, you get Medicaid immediately.
By the way,
Okay. So the SSDI program also has some work incentives. I'm going to oversimplify a little bit here, but if you get SSDI and you go to work for the first time, you can work and earn any amount for at least the first 12 months and still keep your full benefits, no matter how high your earnings are. After that, your earnings need to stay below a certain amount in order to keep your Social Security disability benefits. And that amount this year is under $1,260 a month for non-blind people and under $2,110 a month for blind people. But you can earn more than those amounts and still keep your SSDI benefits in many cases, because there are certain deductions from earnings that you're allowed. And what matters is not just your gross wages or your net self-employment income, but what's left over after the deductions. If that amount, what's left over, is under $1,260 a month or under $2,110 a month if you're blind, then you can still keep your SSDI. So what kinds of deductions can you use? From your gross wages, you can deduct expenses that you paid for that were related to your disability or another medical condition you have that are needed at least partly for work. That could be accessible transportation, assistive technology, attendant services, job coaching if you paid for it, medical needs, etc. Also, if you get paid the full wage for your job, but your productivity is lower, maybe you work slower than the average worker, or there's certain duties you can't fully perform, or you get extra help to do the job from a job coach, a coworker, or a supervisor, there are deductions for those amounts as well.
Michael?
Yes.
Excuse me, it's Sarah.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Lori just let me know that she can't see the chat box and on her screen, and the questions are building. I don't know what you prefer to do, so people can keep typing them in and then we can take them when you're finished. I'm concerned because others are giving advice in the chat box, and I know enough that I don't ever answer any benefits related question under penalty of death by my WIPA staff. So I want to be sure people are only getting answers from you or other WIPA staff who are on, but you tell me what you want to do.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to take a break in just a moment, and then I'll relinquish the screen so we can answer questions in the chat. Okay. So suppose that a person earns enough to stop their cash benefits even after the deductions from earnings, and their SSDI stops. There are some protections then. They can get benefits back again if their earnings later drop low enough or stop without having to reapply, kind of similar to one of the work incentives in the SSI program. If a person works their way off SSDI, they can still keep their Medicare, they can keep it indefinitely. And there's a program called EID, that's the Employed Individuals with Disabilities program, that can enable a person to qualify for Medicaid, also known as medical assistance, if they're working and they're not eligible for Medicaid another way. That's one of the work incentives I mentioned earlier that actually gives you an extra benefit if you're working for pay. And I'm going to go ahead and pause here and relinquish the screen so that, let's see if I can. There we go, stop sharing. Okay. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and start looking through the chat here. Okay, we do have a link for captioning in case anyone needs it, which is in the chat. Okay, we had a comment from Cheryl who says, I was working part-time at the time I applied and still got my benefits on the first try. Yes, thank you, Cheryl.
Miracles do happen.
For bearing me out. Yeah, many people actually do get approved for benefits on the first try. Unfortunately, over 2/3 of people who apply don't get approved on the first try. They usually have to appeal twice to get benefits, but many people do get approved on the first try. Let's see. Bob is talking about other people hearing horror stories. Alexis asks, will my benefit get cut off if I work part-time? Answer is not necessarily at all. The work incentives we talked about may be able to provide protection for benefits. See, Deborah says, while I understand the work incentives can be reinstated, however, if a recipient's cost of living is based on the earned income and they're no longer working, they may have a gap in covering their bills. For example, if the recipient gets the SSDI back that is less than what they were earning, what's available to cover the gap between the SSDI and the earned income? Unemployment. This is the dilemma with advising my family member to work full-time. Yeah, this is a good point, Deborah. What I'll say is, if you're used to living exclusively on your benefits from Social Security, and you go to work full-time, and now you have a higher income, and perhaps you work your way off your cash benefits from Social Security, then what you're well advised to do is start stockpiling, start saving some of that money so you'd have a cushion if you became temporarily unemployed. Because you're right, sometimes people will have more money working full-time, even without their cash benefits, often they will, than they would if they worked part-time and kept their cash benefits. So, so it is important to have a safety net, have savings in the event you become unemployed temporarily. Although, yes, unemployment benefits can sometimes fill that gap. If a person on SSI, Lori asks, goes to work, can they still get medical benefits through Medicaid? Absolutely. Even if they work their way off SSI, there's a protection for Medicaid. David says, think of it this way, while the person was employed, they enjoyed more income than they would have if they were relying on SSDI alone. In some cases, the SSDI benefit can increase if the work increased the person's lifetime average earnings. Also true, thank you, David. If a person has higher earnings through full-time work after their SSDI has stopped, that can, perhaps a few years later, actually increase the amount of their SSDI. Alexis says, I was told that I would not be able to get my parents' Social Security because I was not 18. Yes, you can't get Social Security disability on your parents' earnings until you're at least 18. However, there's another benefit that you can get as a child if you have a parent who's getting Social Security retirement or Social Security disability, or the parent is deceased. It's called a child's benefit. And you don't even have to be disabled to qualify for that benefit. Lori asks, why the 2-year wait for Medicare with SSDI? Because Congress is nasty. Because even when the Affordable Care Act was first being conceived, that was part of the discussion. Why don't we eliminate that 2-year waiting period for Medicare? And I think the bean counters, the actuaries, said no, it'd be too expensive. So it never made the final cut. And people still have that 2-year wait. Okay. Deborah says, yes, my family member's SSDI benefit did increase slightly as a result of working. That's good. And Chiffon asks, what if you're working part-time and you want to start a home-based business? How does that affect your benefits? Well, self-employment is treated similarly to employment, but there are some different rules. I can say that generally self-employment you ordinarily reduce the amount of SSI you get, but again, it's by less than half the amount of your net self-employment earnings. Self-employment earnings that are high enough can stop Social Security disability after a period of time, but there are some deductions from self-employment income that can be applied that can help keep the earnings below the limit so you can keep your full Social Security disability benefit.
It is fair to say, right, that it has to be income from that business, not just gross income, but actual income.
Right, Mike. It's generally going to be measured by Social Security starts with net income from your business, which would be the gross revenue that your business brings in, the total cash that your business brings in, minus the business expenses that you pay for.
And there should be a lot of them.
Yes.
As someone who's been in business for 30 years off and on over my lifetime, you can find all kinds of expenses that are necessary to run that business. So if you're not finding many, talk to me and I'll help you figure it out.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, and Cheryl says, Alexis, I believe that your parents have to be retired first before you can claim under them. Yes, to get either a Social Security disability benefit on your parents' record or to get that child's benefit I was talking about before you're 18, you have to have a parent who's getting Social Security retirement, or the parent has to be getting Social Security disability, or the parent has to be deceased. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back to presentation here. Okay, and these work incentives sound nice, but they sound a little vague and abstract. The question is, are you really better off working than not working if you get benefits from Social Security? We're up to slide 17 with a puzzled looking dog with his head cocked, wondering. And slide 18 gives an example of Melody, who's receiving SSI. Starts out with a maximum SSI benefit for a single individual, $783 a month. She starts working 20 hours a week, earning $11 an hour, then increases her hours to 30 hours a week, still earning $11 an hour, and finally she works full-time 40 hours a week at $11 an hour. So is she really going to be better off? On slide 19, there's a bar graph that shows that if she's not working and gets only SSI, she's got $783 a month. Secondly, when she's working 20 hours a week and earning $11 an hour, even after taxes, although her SSI is substantially reduced, because she's also got her earnings on top of that, she ends up with significantly more money. Same thing happens when she's working 30 hours a week. Her SSI is even lower, but she's got higher earnings that more than make up for it, and she's still better off than working 20 hours a week. And finally, working 40 hours a week, even though her SSI is reduced to 0, she still has more money because of her full-time wages. Even after taxes, she's got more money than working part-time. And she'll be able to keep her Medicaid, most likely through that work incentive I mentioned that protects Medicaid, even if you work your way off SSI. And an SSDI example, here's Buster, who started out getting, this is slide 20, I'm sorry. Buster started out getting only SSDI of $850 a month. He started working part-time, working 25 hours a week and earning $11 an hour, and he kept his SSDI. His earnings were below the $1,260 a month level we were talking about a little earlier. But then he got a better job working full-time at $15 an hour. His earnings were high enough that his SSDI stopped. Was he better off or not? Well, slide 21 is a bar graph showing when he's not working, he gets only the $850 of SSDI. When he works the part-time job, he keeps the $850 of SSDI and gets a good chunk of earnings, even after taxes, added on top of that. So he's much better off. But working 40 hours a week at $15 an hour, even though he's earning enough to stop his SSDI, you can see that his net income is still significantly higher than if he worked part-time and kept his SSDI. Many people working full-time, if they can earn a high enough wage, can be better off without SSDI than if they worked part-time and kept SSDI. And as I mentioned earlier, they can keep Medicare indefinitely, and there are work incentives that will let them go back on SSDI without reapplying if anything happens to their jobs later. So, as slide 22 points out, with a bag of money, you really are better off working. And you can be better off working your way off cash benefits in many cases. So, you now know just enough to be dangerous, but how can you get one-to-one assistance using these work incentives? Well, if you have a case open with DOORS, the Maryland Division of Rehabilitation Services, you can ask your DOORS counselor to arrange benefits planning for you. They're supposed to do it. If you get SSI or SSDI and you're actively pursuing work or already working, they're supposed to provide you with certified benefits counseling. And if you're not working with DOORS, if you don't have a case open with DOORS, you can call the Ticket to Work helpline at 866-968-7842, and you'll be connected with an excellent source of certified benefits counseling called the Maryland Work Incentives Network. Services are free to you, and Kimberly Pierce from the Maryland Work Incentives Network is going to be giving you more information in the last 5 minutes of the presentation time today. about the free benefits planning that's available. Did want to talk a little bit, if there's anyone here representing an employment service provider, an agency that provides employment services to people with disabilities, about something called the Ticket to Work, which is something you should be all over if you work for an agency that provides employment services. The Ticket to Work was designed as a way for people who get SSI or SSDI to get employment supports from either DOORS or another organization called an employment network. And what it does is it provides monthly payments to organizations called employment networks that, that get certified to provide services through the Ticket to Work to people with disabilities. So you can get ticket payments, Ticket to Work payments, if your agency becomes an employment network and people who you're serving reach certain earnings levels. And there are several reasons you should consider doing this. One is that if you're serving a person and they use their Ticket to Work to get services from your agency, you could be fully funded to serve that person through other sources, maybe DOORS, maybe the Developmental Disabilities Administration, the Behavioral Health Administration, or other sources. You can get full funding to provide employment supports to that person. If they reach certain earnings levels, you can also get Ticket to Work payments. So in other words, it's bonus money. It's not just money to reimburse you for services you've provided. If you're fully funded from another source to serve somebody and they reach those earnings levels, you, the agency, can still get the extra money through those Ticket to Work payments on top of it. So it's a great supplemental funding source. We're up to slide 26. Secondly, the payments can be very substantial. This year, for a person who gets SSDI and reaches those earnings levels, over a period of a little over 4.5 years, your agency could get almost $30,000 for serving that person. If you get all possible Ticket to Work payments. If the person gets SSI instead, it would take a little over 7 years, but you could get up to over $28,000. So it can be a significant amount of money that can be realized through the Ticket to Work. The ticket payments are unrestricted revenue. You can use them for any legal purpose. So if your agency gets Ticket to Work payments, you can use them, pay for anything you like. And the administrative tasks are not very onerous, particularly if you partner with an organization known as an administrative employment network. They're already registered as an employment network with Social Security. You kind of piggyback onto their employment network status. They do most of the administrative tasks involved in enabling you to get Ticket to Work payments, and then you split the revenue with them. You usually get 80% of the revenue if you're providing the employment supports. The administrative employment network gets the other 20%. And I wanted to leave time for questions and certainly for Kimberly. But let me see if we've got anything else in the chat here.
Michael, I put one thing in the chat that might be of interest, and that is there is a job opening for a part-time person who wants to work doing customer survey work with the folks at the coordinating center. So I put their website address in. If you want to do some survey work, I think they're going to pay a reasonable amount of money. It's part-time, but you can work at your own pace and from your home. So there's an opportunity for you to play around with your benefits and see how it all works.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike. So Stephanie says, if you're working currently and making more than what you would be qualified to get on SSDI or SSI, can you still apply in order to get Medicaid or Medicare? Would you be able to get the Medicare benefit after 2 years if your working income is more than the qualifying amount? That's an excellent question. When you first apply for SSDI or SSI, if you're currently working, if your earnings are below $1,260 a month, or if you're blind, if your earnings are below $2,110 a month, you may be eligible for benefits without using any additional work incentives. If your earnings are above those amounts, you may be able to use some of those subtractions, those deductions from earnings I mentioned. And if the difference after the deductions is below $1,260 or below $2,110 a month, if you're blind, then you could still qualify for benefits. And I hope I'm not going to confuse things too much, but if you meet Social Security's definition of blindness and you're applying for SSI rather than SSDI, you could be earning even more and still qualify for SSI. So if you get approved for SSDI or SSI, yes, Stephanie, then you could get with SSDI after a 2-year wait, you could get Medicare, and with SSI, you could get the Medicaid immediately. Now, there are other ways to get Medicaid besides being eligible for SSI, dozens of ways, in fact. So you may want to speak with someone who knows benefits to find out other alternatives. But what you described is a possibility. Lori asks, do SILs provide benefits planning and ticket to work planning? A number of them do. And I'll let them speak up for themselves, but we've got several people representing one of the SILs on the call that, and Kimberly Pierce will be speaking about the project momentarily.
At the Image Center, we provide benefits. We have benefits counseling, and we also do some work for the WIPA program as well. And you might want to mention WIPA for people to call in and to get information. They're very helpful.
Absolutely. And Lori will tell you that Resources for Independence also has a certified benefits planner on staff. They also contract through the Maryland Work Incentives Network. Independence Now runs the Maryland Work Incentives Network. So they certainly provide the services.
And our counselor is actually on with us today. Bob Cannon is with us, so he's waiting.
Bob.
Yeah.
Lori, this is Audrey from ARI. So I responded to you in the comments down below. Like Mike said, some do, some don't. ARI does not, but if you call Maryland Work Incentives Network, you will end up speaking with someone from a SIL.
Thank you, Audrey. Okay.
Somebody want to throw that Maryland Work Incentives Network phone number in the chat?
Well, hang on, Mike, because Kimberly's going to talk about it. We have
good.
Ready
Okay,
to
excellent.
and thank you.
Okay. Crystal asks, how can you keep Medicare indefinitely and how expensive can that get? Well, there are 2 work incentives that can let you keep Medicare if you've worked your way off SSDI. The first one is called the extended period of Medicare coverage. That lets you keep Medicare for years longer than you keep SSDI without having to pay anything extra for it. And then there's another work incentive that follows extended period of Medicare coverage called premium health insurance for the working disabled. And that can let you keep the Medicare indefinitely. If you're keeping the Medicare indefinitely through premium health insurance for the working disabled, you may have to pay an extra premium to keep Medicare. And that's typically currently $252 a month. However, there's another work incentive that may enable you to keep the Medicare without having to pay that extra premium, and that can apply, that you can qualify for if you're earning up to a little over $52,000 a year in earned income from work. If the only catch with that work incentive, or the biggest catch, is that you can't be receiving Medicaid or medical assistance and be eligible for that work incentive. Okay, Lena says, my 20-year-old son has SSDI and Medicare. We were advised to apply for SSI in order to get Medicaid, which we need to continue to be eligible for DDA. We're supposed to place him in residential placement when he's 21. Edwina, if he gets only SSDI and Medicare, he may have too much income to get SSI currently, but as I mentioned, there are other ways he could qualify for Medicaid. And I recommend speaking with a benefits planner. Audrey already mentioned her comment to Lori, which is here. Thank you, Audrey. By the way, Audrey is a friend of my son who broke the lamp in the story I began with.
I am. And I am seeing him in a week and a half. I will give him a hug for you.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. And Abiola asks, can I discuss the 40 quarters component of approval for SSDI, and why some people may be denied for SSDI because they didn't pay into the Social Security system for 40 plus quarters. Okay. Yes, so Abiola, you're absolutely right. In order for a person to qualify for Social Security disability, either they or a parent or a deceased spouse has to have worked and paid into the system long enough. How long do you have to have paid into the system? If the person, let me talk just about SSDI to narrow the focus a little bit here. SSDI being the benefit that you get as a person with a disability on your own work history. So you, the person with a disability, are the one who've worked and paid Social Security taxes on your earnings. If you're not blind, then generally you have to have worked at least 5 out of the last 10 years in order to qualify for SSDI. If you're blind, you don't necessarily have to have done recent work, but you have to have earned at least 1 work credit for each year after you turned 21 up until you reach age 62 or become disabled, whichever comes first. To earn a work credit this year, you have to have earned at least $1,410 during a year. And you can earn up to 4 credits in a year, which would be $5,640 a year. So are you going to remember these numbers? Absolutely not. The point is that you have to have worked a certain length of time and paid into the system. If you're not blind, some of the work has to have been recent. If you are blind, it doesn't have to have been recent. It could have been all work that you did years ago. Also, if you apply for SSDI before you turn 31, you may not need quite as many work credits in order to qualify. If you apply before you're 24, you could qualify with as little as 1.5 years of work. And Cheryl asked if I can talk about EID, which is amazing. Yes, EID is a great way to get Medicaid if you don't.
We have like about 4 minutes, so just a little
Yeah,
caution there.
I'm just going to mention it, and then I'm turning it over to Kimberly. So, so EID is a great way for working people to get Medicaid, and it has very high income and asset limits and a nominal monthly premium that people have to pay. All right. Sorry, Kimberly, it's all yours.
That's okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly Pierce. I'm a Community Work Incentive Coordinator, CWIC for short, or Benefits Counselor, who provides benefits counseling through the Maryland Work Incentive Network, or we call it Maryland WIND. And most of the CWICs have very many years of experience in working with the Social Security Work Incentive Plan and Assistance Program. We call it WIPA for short. And the ones that are on the video, if you can just identify yourself by just waving your hand, you're one of the benefits counselors. I know some are on the phone, so you can't do that. But these are the individuals that work in the Maryland WIN benefits counseling. I'm going to also share my screen if I can. Can I share? Oh, here it is. And I wanted to take everybody to the it's not coming up. Can everybody see that? The Independence Now Center for Independence Living?
No, we don't see it.
Oh. Share. I need to hit the share button.
There you go. Now you got it.
Sorry about that. So the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance Program actually is a grant through the Social Security Administration. And we work with any individual who's between the ages of 14 and full retirement age who has already receiving Social Security disability benefits, SSI or SSDI. And the individual is looking to go to work, is currently working, or is anticipating to go to work. Everybody did ask about the phone number to refer a person. So if you scan down to the bottom of the webpage from Independence Now, you will see all the counselors listed, or the CWICs, which is another name for benefits counselors that participate in the Maryland Work Incentive Network program. And then it has at the very bottom, it says you can refer yourself by calling the Ticket to Work helpline at 1-866-968-7842. And that's where you can refer yourself for benefits counseling through the WIPA program. WIPA also provides benefits analysis. So if a beneficiary is wanting to go to work or is already working, we will actually provide them a benefits analysis of how work can be impacted, not only their SSI or SSDI benefits, but also their medical benefits. We also provide benefits planning, helping that person go through the different work incentives and how to utilize those work incentives and how to report to Social Security, because that's real important right now with COVID, having to be able to report to Social Security. And then the only other thing that I wanted to say is that, like I said, we have really good group and we have very experienced counselors. So if you have a beneficiary that's receiving Social Security disability benefits and is thinking about going to work or currently working, please send them our way. And you can do that by calling the Ticket to Work helpline to refer. That's it.
All right. Thank you very much. Lori, you still there? You want to close it out? And then we'll do community announcements.
Okay, well, oh.
Yep, you're on. Oh, you went away.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, I think we can all appreciate how complicated this process can possibly be. But it's really, really good to know that we also have.
Oops.
She froze.
Try turning your video off.
Yeah. Yeah, you're dropping in and out, Lori. Sorry. Tell you what, we're running out of daylight here. So let me try this. We're going to do community announcements in just a second. Be sure and attend next week if you want to talk about elections and find out what the rules are and where you can vote and how you can vote and what the issues are around disability and voting. Please come to the show next week. Be sure and go register on the site. Now, do we have community announcements for this week? Anybody?
Yeah, this is Charita from Maryland Relay. I just wanted to let everybody know that on Friday I will have a webinar. It's open to the general public. It should be on our Facebook page, on Maryland Relay's Facebook page. And I'm going to drop the registration link in the notes as well. So.
Excellent. If you don't have, if you need specialized equipment, Telecommunications Access Maryland, these folks are wonderful. Go ahead and get in touch with them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Any other community announcements? All right. Let me finally remind you that IAM is a program produced weekly by Centers for Independent Living, your hub for information and services in every community in Maryland. Please come and visit us if you need assistance. And we can't do this for free. So if you have a 5 or a 10 or a 20 or a 50 or a 100 or $500 and you want to give it to us in order to help fund these programs, will be eternally grateful to you. We do it all as nonprofits by getting donations from folks like you. So thank you all very much for being here this week. And if there are no other announcements, this will be the conclusion of IAM, Independence Access Maryland. Thank you all very much.